It's a 4:15 in the morning, on a Monday in July 26. Victoria Street, Richmond, an inner suburb of Melbourne, Australia. A vehicle is driven straight through the front of a shop. Moments later, the building is on fire. Fire crews arrive within 3 minutes. It isn't enough. The blaze tears through the building, and by the time it's brought under control around 6 a.m., roughly 10 businesses have been damaged or destroyed. It takes 80 firefighters and about 25 trucks. A damaged white four-wheel drive is left abandoned outside the shop front. One of Melbourne's busiest streets is closed through morning peak hour. Trams are suspended. The suspected target? A street-level tobacco shop. This was the third attack in this one suburb in about 6 weeks. A tobacconist on Bridge Road had been set alight at the start of July. Before that, a car dealership on Swan Street. The local mayor described the situation as a cancer spreading through the city, and said residents now wake up each day wondering where the next fire will be. But here's the thing. This wasn't unusual. By the time Victoria Street burned, there had been more than 150 arson attacks on tobacco shops across the state of Victoria in just over 3 years, plus dozens more targeting cars, restaurants, bars, and other businesses. This is the story of how one of the safest, wealthiest countries on Earth ended up with the longest-running arson campaign in the history of its second-largest city. A war fought not over drugs or territory in the traditional sense, but over something you can buy at any corner store. Cigarettes. To understand how this war started, you don't begin with gangsters. You begin with public health policy. For decades, Australia has fought one of the world's most aggressive campaigns against smoking: graphic warning labels, plain packaging laws, advertising bans. And above all, tax. Year after year, government after government, the excise on tobacco was raised, on a simple theory: make cigarettes expensive enough, and people will quit. And to be fair, many did. Australia's smoking rates fell to among the lowest in the developed world. As a health policy, it was widely considered a success story. But by the 20s, the numbers had reached a level that created something else entirely. Through a combination of state and federal levies, tax came to make up roughly 65% of the cost of cigarettes, among the highest rates anywhere in the world. A legal pack in Melbourne was heading toward $50. A Victorian parliamentary inquiry put it in the starkest possible terms. A pack-a-day smoker buying legally could expect to spend almost $15,000 a year on their habit. The same smoker, buying the same amount on the black market, would spend about $3,000, $50 a pack legally, as little as $15 under the counter. That gap, $35 on every single pack, multiplied across millions of smokers, is the prize this entire war is fought over. Because when a legal product becomes unaffordable, but demand doesn't disappear, history is very clear about what happens next. America learned it in the 1920s, when prohibition didn't stop people drinking. It just handed the entire alcohol market to organized crime. Commentators would later describe Melbourne's situation in exactly those terms. A modern prohibition built not by banning a product, but by pricing it out of legal reach. The supply side was almost embarrassingly easy. Illicit cigarettes, some genuine foreign brands, some counterfeit, could be hidden in shipping containers from the Middle East, China, and Southeast Asia. In 2023 alone, Australian border authorities seized around 1.8 billion cigarettes, but officials admitted they could physically inspect only about 1% of the more than 3 million containers passing through Melbourne's ports each year, seize one shipment, and 99 sail through. By the mid-20s, according to that same parliamentary inquiry, illicit tobacco accounted for nearly 29% of all tobacco consumed, almost 1 in 3 cigarettes smoked, completely untaxed, and controlled by criminals. None of this happened overnight. Police would later say organized crime's interest in the tobacco trade went back to around 2015. By 2018, the federal government had formed a dedicated illicit tobacco task force to fight the syndicates moving into the market. The attraction, from a criminal's point of view, was obvious: profit margins that rivaled drugs, with penalties that were, at the time, dramatically softer. Get caught with a container of heroin, and you're facing decades in prison. Get caught with a container of cigarettes? For years, the consequences were closer to a business expense. For a while, it was quiet money, front companies, ordinary-looking corner stores and tobacconists selling cheap packs under the counter to customers who asked. No violence, no headlines. That quiet lasted until early 23, when the people running this economy tried to organize it. In early 23, according to police and investigative reporting, something remarkable happened in Melbourne's Underworld. The major players in the illicit tobacco trade came together and formed what has been described as a commission, an agreement between crime syndicates to regulate the prices of illegal cigarettes across the city. Think about that for a moment. The black market had grown so large and so profitable that the criminals running it decided it needed market regulation, a cartel in the most literal sense. But the deal had a flaw. It left someone out. His name is Kazem Hamad, and according to police and court-adjacent reporting, the decision to exclude him from that commission is what turned a black market into a battlefield. Hamad's story, as reported by Australian media, he arrived in Australia as a refugee from Iraq. He later served roughly 8 years in prison for heroin trafficking, and in 23 he was deported, sent back to Iraq, and later reported to be operating out of Dubai. Here's what makes him unusual. Most gang bosses in history have fought their wars from inside the territory they control. Hamad, according to investigators, would allegedly run his side of this war from thousands of kilometers away, overseeing the smuggling of cigarettes into Australia, hidden in shipping containers, and directing what police allege became a sprawling extortion racket. All of it, allegedly, without setting foot in the country. And for a long time, the public wasn't even allowed to know his name. A court suppression order kept his identity out of the press. It was only lifted in December 24. For well over a year, Melburnians watched shops burn on the evening news without being permitted to know who police believed was behind it. The first fires came in March 23 in Melbourne's northern suburbs. Tobacco shops and vape stores hit in the early hours of the morning, petrol through the window, a shop front, a light before dawn. Then another, then another. By the end of 23, there had been roughly 50 such attacks. What was happening, according to police and reporting by outlets like The Age and The Guardian, was a turf war. On one side, the network allegedly directed by Hamad from overseas. On the other, established local players, most prominently, reporting identified the Hadara family, a long-standing Melbourne crime name. The prize was control of the illicit tobacco supply chain, from the containers at the docks, through the warehouses, down to the corner stores selling the final product. And the corner stores are where the war became visible, because in this conflict, the front line isn't a drug lab or a nightclub, it's the tobacconist at the end of your street. The extortion model, as pieced together by journalists and police, allegedly works like this. A tobacco retailer is approached, sometimes with a note left on the shop front, sometimes in person. The message, stock our product, pay what you owe, or contact the commission on an encrypted messaging number. Comply, and business continues. Refuse, and your shop burns. And the people lighting the fires, usually not gangsters at all. According to reporting, when a shop owner refuses, a contract is allegedly posted through encrypted online channels and picked up by outsiders, teenagers, junior members of bikie gangs. Veteran crime reporter John Sylvester would later report that some firebombings were being outsourced for as little as $500. $500 to destroy someone's livelihood. And for the organizers, near perfect insulation. The person holding the petrol can has often never met and couldn't identify the person who ordered the fire. By the end of 23, the pattern was set. What nobody predicted was how far it would spread and who it would eventually kill. Through 24, the pace accelerated. The attacks spread from the northern suburbs across the city, Coburg, Brunswick, Sunshine, Footscray, Dandenong, Springvale, and then beyond Melbourne entirely, into regional Victorian towns. And the fires did not stay neatly contained to their targets. In Coburg, a blaze at a convenience store spread to the nightclub next door, destroying thousands of dollars of equipment. In Faulkner, an arson attack on a smoke shop heavily damaged the neighboring businesses, including a family-owned cake shop. Ordinary businesses, run by people with no connection to any of this, wiped out overnight because of who they shared a wall with. Victoria Police responded by forming a dedicated operation, Task Force Lunar, and on paper, it produced results. By early 25, police had counted more than 125 arson attacks, and made over 100 arrests. But the fires kept coming, and the reason exposes the structural problem at the heart of this war. The people being arrested were, overwhelmingly, the bottom layer. The hired hands, many of them young, recruited through encrypted apps to light a fire for a few $100s. The organizers were somewhere else entirely, offshore, communicating through encrypted platforms, allegedly moving money through cryptocurrency. Police could arrest the arsonists all day long. There was always another teenager willing to take the next contract. Then the war started killing people. In August 24, and again in October, 2 men were murdered in execution-style shootings that investigating police linked to the tobacco conflict. The war had a body count. And then, in January 25, came the event that changed how the entire country saw this conflict. In the early hours of the morning, in Truganina in Melbourne's outer west, a house was firebombed. Inside was a 27-year-old woman named Katie Tangi. She was house-sitting for her brother, who was overseas on his honeymoon. She had no connection whatsoever to tobacco, to crime, or to anyone involved in this war. The attackers, police believe, had the wrong address. Katie Tangi died in that fire. She was, as one major investigation put it, the war's first innocent death. A young woman killed in her own family's home, by people who were reportedly never even meant to be there. If there was a moment this stopped being an economic story, a story about tax rates and profit margins, this was it. And the violence wasn't staying in its lane. In December 24, the Adas Israel Synagogue in Melbourne was set on fire, an attack that shocked the nation and was investigated as terrorism. In the months that followed, reporting revealed that police had linked that firebombing to the same network allegedly behind the tobacco attacks, with Hamad himself implicated in reporting as allegedly connected to attacks on Jewish businesses. Whether every link alleged in that reporting holds up in court remains to be seen. But the broader point police were making was chilling. Once a city has an established arson-for-hire economy, anonymous contracts, encrypted channels, interchangeable young offenders, that infrastructure can be pointed at anything, or anyone. And through all of it, the everyday absurdities piled up. Reporting described parts of the illicit market where gangs were effectively policing themselves, enforcing their own rules in the vacuum left by the state. Meanwhile, Victoria, the epicenter of the entire crisis, didn't even have an enforced licensing scheme for tobacco retailers until early last year. For most of the war, literally anyone could open a tobacco shop. No license, no background check, nothing. More than 2 years in, the government was still building the regulatory tools most comparable jurisdictions had possessed for decades. By early 26, the running tally of arson and attempted arson attacks linked to illicit tobacco had passed 200. And just when authorities thought they understood the shape of this war, it evolved. In April 26, the fires changed targets. Restaurants, bars, pubs. Within weeks, a wave of firebombings began hitting Melbourne's hospitality industry, venues with no connection to tobacco at all. By mid-year, close to 20 restaurant and bar attacks had been connected by authorities to the same Underworld networks, with some reporting putting the number of targeted venues higher still. The press gave the new front a name, the Bar Wars. Why bars? Because according to authorities, the syndicates were diversifying, moving beyond tobacco and into the trade in illicit alcohol. The playbook was already written, the infrastructure already existed. The same model that had worked on tobacconists, supply the product, demand compliance, burn those who refuse, was simply pointed at a new industry. Publicans and club owners began receiving the same style of threats that tobacconists had been getting for 3 years. According to ABC reporting in May 26, the message delivered to some venue owners amounted to this: the police cannot protect you. And the disturbing part is, the number suggested they had a point. 3 years, more than 200 fires, over 100 arrests, almost all of them replaceable foot soldiers. The alleged organizers remained offshore, out of reach, protected by distance, encryption, and jurisdictions beyond Australian law. Police themselves began openly warning that they risked falling behind, that the syndicate's use of encrypted communications and cryptocurrency was outpacing the tools available to law enforcement. Underworld sources even told reporters that the syndicates had commissioned a delivery app, a platform where customers could order illicit cigarettes to their door, like any other food delivery service. a black market with a tech stack. Which brings us back to where we started. 4:15 in the morning, a car through a bow. Shop front on Victoria Street, 10 businesses burning, the third attack in one suburb in 6 weeks. That fire happened this month. This is not history. As this video is being made, the Melbourne Tobacco Wars are not a closed case with a verdict and a lesson. They are ongoing. The next fire is, statistically speaking, a matter of weeks, perhaps days. So, who is actually to blame for all of this? The obvious answer is the men lighting the fires and the people allegedly directing them, and that answer is true. Nothing about tax policy forces anyone to burn down a shop, or fire a gun, or take a contract that ends with a stranger's house alight. But there is a harder question underneath, and it's the one Australia is now openly arguing about. Critics of the government's approach point to the brutal arithmetic. As long as a legal pack costs up to $50 and an illegal one costs $15, the black market doesn't need to recruit customers. The price gap does it automatically. In their view, Australia effectively reran the prohibition experiment, not by banning a product, but by taxing it beyond the reach of the people most likely to use it. And it got prohibition's results: a criminal industry worth billions, and violence spilling into ordinary streets. The government's defenders answer with a different set of numbers: the smoking rates that fell for decades, the cancers that never happened, the lives extended. High tobacco taxes, they argue, remain one of the most effective public health tools ever deployed, and surrendering them because criminals moved in would be rewarding the arsonists. Both of these things can be true at once. That's what makes this story so uncomfortable. A policy that genuinely saved lives also, unintentionally, built the most profitable criminal market in the country, and then left it essentially unpoliced for years while it armed itself. As of today, the count stands at more than 200 arson attacks linked to this conflict. 2 men murdered. 1 innocent woman, Katie Tangi, killed in a house that was never meant to be a target. Hundreds of ordinary business owners caught between criminal demands on one side, and, on the other, a government still assembling its response. And a rice gap, $50 against $15, that remains exactly where it was when the first shop burned. Until that changes, or until someone finds a way to reach the people allegedly running this war from the other side of the world, the fires, in all likelihood, will continue. This has been the story of the Melbourne Tobacco Wars. So far,